The banker was irritated by his daughter digging in the dirt, until the new governess unearthed something. Richard Thompson slammed his fist on the desk when he saw for the 5th time that month little Emily, with her hands covered in dirt, in the garden. The 42-year-old man, owner of one of the largest financial institutions in New York City, couldn't understand how a child of his social standing insisted on behaving that way. It was in that moment of despair that the new governess arrived. Sarah Williams, a simple 35-year-old woman from the countryside of Pennsylvania, had taken the job because her savings had run out, and she needed to support her sick mother in Lancaster. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Sarah Williams. I'm here for the interview," she said, adjusting her brown hair tied in a simple bun. Richard barely looked at her, too busy watching Emily through his office window. The girl was always digging in the same spot, near a cherry tree that grew by itself in that corner of the backyard. "Listen carefully, Mrs. Williams. My daughter has unacceptable behavior. She insists on playing in the dirt as if she were just any child. This needs to stop immediately." Sarah looked through the window and saw a little girl with dark curls focused on her task, using a small toy shovel to make holes in the dark soil. "Excuse me, sir, but how old is she?" 8 years old, and before you ask, I've had 5 governesses in 3 months. They all failed to make Emily behave as an heiress should." The answer left Sarah intrigued. How could a father expect an 8-year-old child not to want to play in the dirt? Still, she desperately needed the job. "I accept the position, Mr. Thompson. When can I start?" "Immediately. Mrs. Jenkins, the maid, will show you to your quarters. And remember, 0 tolerance for this kind of playing in the garden." That first afternoon, Sarah was introduced to Emily, who received her with suspicion. The girl had the same dark eyes as her father, but where his were cold, hers shone with a heartbreaking sadness. "Are you going to forbid me from playing outside too?" asked Emily, pointing to the garden through the bedroom window. "Why do you like playing in the dirt so much, dear?" Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip. It was clear she had already learned not to trust adults easily. "I just like it," she murmured, looking away. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That first night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Something about that situation didn't make sense. During her 15 years working with children in the countryside, she had never met a father who was so bothered by something as natural as a child playing in the dirt. The next morning, she decided to observe more closely. Emily went straight to the garden after breakfast, walking with determination to the same corner as always. Sarah followed her discreetly and noticed something curious. The girl wasn't playing randomly. She was always digging in the same spot, as if looking for something specific. "Emily, what are you looking for?" asked Sarah, approaching slowly. The girl stopped digging and looked at the governess with tears in her eyes. "You won't tell Daddy, will you?" "That depends. Tell me first what's going on." Emily wiped her tears with the back of her hand, which was dirty with soil, and whispered, "Mommy said she left a treasure here for me. She promised before she left." Sarah's heart tightened. Mrs. Jenkins had briefly mentioned that Richard's wife had passed away 2 years prior, but hadn't given any details. "Your mum told you where this treasure was?" "She said I would know where to look when the time came, and I feel like it's here, you know, near the tree she planted." Sarah looked at the cherry tree. The tree didn't seem to be more than 3 years old, which meant it had been planted shortly before Emily's mother passed away. That afternoon, while Emily slept, Sarah went looking for Mrs. Jenkins in the kitchen. The 60-year-old woman had worked in the house for over 2 decades and knew the family better than anyone. "Mrs. Jenkins, can I ask you a question about Mrs. Thompson?" The maid stopped washing the dishes and looked around, making sure they were alone. "What do you want to know, child? What was she like? And why does Mr. Richard get so upset about Emily playing in the garden?" Jenkins took a deep sigh and dried her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Catherine was a special woman, you know. She loved plants, flowers. She spent hours taking care of this garden. Emily was attached to her. The two of them always had their hands in the dirt, planting, watering, picking the little fruits. And what happened? Mrs. Catherine got sick, very sick. In her last months, even when she was weak, she insisted on spending time in the garden. She said she had important things to do out there. Mr. Richard would get irritated. He wanted her to rest in bed, but she wouldn't listen. Sarah absorbed this information. She was beginning to understand why Richard was so bothered by Emily being in the garden. That place brought back painful memories. "Mrs. Jenkins, do you know if Mrs. Catherine left anything written? Notes, letters, anything?" The maid lowered her voice even further. "She wrote a lot in her final days, always in secret when Mr. Richard was working. But after she passed, he burned everything, said he didn't want painful reminders in the house." That revelation left Sarah thoughtful. If Catherine had really left something buried for her daughter, perhaps Richard knew about it and was trying to protect Emily from possible disappointment. In the following days, Sarah observed the behavior of father and daughter. Richard avoided looking at the garden, always closing the curtains when he passed by the windows facing the backyard. During meals, he barely spoke to Emily, limiting himself to practical questions about school and homework. Emily, in turn, was becoming sadder and sadder. Not being able to play in the garden, she spent hours looking out the window, sighing deeply. One morning, while Richard was in an important meeting in his home office, Emily slipped away from Sarah's watch and ran into the garden. When the governess found her, the girl was digging frantically with tears streaming down her face. "Emily, you can't—" "Please, Sarah. I know Mommy left something here. I dream about her every night and she always points to this spot." It was at that moment that Richard appeared at the house door, accompanied by 3 men in suits. His partners had come for a meeting about an important investment, but now they found his daughter covered in dirt, crying in the garden. "Emily!" shouted Richard, his face red with anger. "Get inside now," the investors whispered among themselves, clearly embarrassed by the scene. Richard picked Emily up without caring about dirtying his expensive suit and carried her inside. "Mrs. Williams, we'll talk later," he said through clenched teeth before turning to his partners. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. Let's continue in the library." Later that night, Richard called Sarah into his office. The man looked exhausted, running his hands through the graying hair that was beginning to show at his temples. "Mrs. Williams, this can't continue. If you can't control my daughter, I will have to send her to a boarding school in Europe where she will learn to behave properly." "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, she's just a child who misses her mother. Wouldn't it be better to let her dig up whatever she's looking for? Maybe then she'll stop this obsession." Richard stood up abruptly, slamming his hand on the table. "No, absolutely not. No one is digging in this garden. No one is touching that tree. That's my final word." Richard's violent reaction confirmed Sarah's suspicions. He knew something about what Catherine had left buried. "Sir, may I ask why you planted that cherry tree?" Richard froze. His shoulders slumped, and, for a moment, Sarah saw a broken man behind the facade of the successful executive. "I didn't plant it," he whispered. "Catherine planted it. In the last few weeks before she left. She insisted on spending hours in that spot, even when she could barely stand. And you never wondered why?" "I knew why." Richard sat down heavily in the leather armchair. "Catherine always said she wanted to leave something special for Emily. I thought she was delirious because of the medication. But later I started to suspect she had really hidden something." "Then why not let Emily look?" Richard raised his eyes, full of pain, to Sarah. "Because if she finds nothing, she'll suffer even more. And if she finds—" he paused, swallowing hard. "If she finds something, I'll have to face the fact that my wife spent her last days preparing a goodbye that I refuse to accept." Sarah felt a wave of compassion for the man in front of her. Richard wasn't a cruel father. He was just a man desperately trying to avoid more pain for himself and his daughter. "Mr. Thompson, may I suggest something? What if we dug together? You, me, and Emily? If we find nothing, she'll see that you tried. If we find something, you'll face it together." Richard was silent for long minutes. Sarah could almost hear the thoughts clashing in his mind. I can't," he said finally. "I can't risk seeing the disappointment on my daughter's face if there's nothing there." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep thinking about the situation. In the morning, she made a decision that could cost her job, but that she felt was the right thing to do. She waited for Richard to leave for the office and called Emily. "Sweetheart, how about the two of us take a little look in the garden today?" Emily's eyes lit up for the first time in days. "Really? You'll help me look for Mommy's treasure?" "Let's try, but it has to be our little secret for now, okay?" They went to the garden equipped with small gardening tools that Sarah had found in the shed. Emily led Sarah to the exact spot where she always dug, near the roots of the cherry tree. "Here, Sarah, I always feel it's here." They began to dig carefully, taking care not to damage the tree's roots. After an hour of work, Sarah's shovel hit something solid. "Emily, I think we found something." With their hearts racing, they removed more soil and revealed a metal box the size of a shoebox, wrapped in plastic for protection against moisture. "It's Mommy's treasure!" shouted Emily, jumping for joy. It was at that moment that they heard the garden gate slam. Richard had come home early from the office and caught them with the box in their hands. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice trembling between anger and shock. Sarah stood up quickly, holding the box carefully. "Mr. Thompson, we found what Emily was looking for. Your wife really did leave something here." Richard approached slowly, as if walking toward a ghost, his eyes fixed on the metal box, and Sarah saw his hands tremble. "Give that to me," he said, reaching out his hand. "Daddy, no!" Emily stepped between them. "Mommy left this for me. She promised. Emily, you don't understand. Don't. Oh, your mother was very sick when she did this. It might not be anything important." "But what if it is?" Emily had tears in her eyes again. "What if she really left something special for me? Are you going to deny me that too?" The question hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. Sarah saw the exact moment he realized how much he had distanced himself from his own daughter in the name of protecting her from pain. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Mrs. Williams, you're fired," said Richard, but his voice lacked its former firmness. "I can't allow you to meddle with things you don't understand." Sarah handed the box to Emily, who hugged it tightly against her chest. "Sir, with all due respect, this box belongs to your daughter. Your wife buried it especially for her." "How can you be sure?" Catherine was delirious in her final days. "It could be anything, something unimportant. Or it could be exactly what your daughter needs to feel connected to the mother she lost," Sarah replied firmly. "You are so afraid of pain that you are denying your daughter the chance to feel the love her mother left behind." Richard looked at Emily, who was holding the box as if it were the most precious thing in the world. For the first time in 2 years, he really looked at his daughter and saw not just a disobedient child, but a little girl who missed her mother immensely. "Emily," he said, kneeling down to her level, "do you really want to open this box?" "More than anything in the world, Daddy." Richard sighed deeply and held out his hand. "Then let's open it together. But if there's nothing important inside—" "There will be, Daddy. I know there will be." They sat down on the lawn, Emily between Richard and Sarah. With trembling hands, Richard helped his daughter remove the protective plastic and open the metal box. Inside were several things carefully arranged. On top, an envelope with the name "For My Little Emily," written in Catherine's elegant handwriting. Below, there were other smaller envelopes numbered from 9 to 18, and at the bottom of the box, small packets of seeds and a photo of the 3 of them together in the garden. Emily picked up the first envelope with reverent care and looked at her father. "Can I read it, Daddy?" Richard nodded, not trusting his own voice. Carefully, Emily opened the envelope and unfolded a letter written on thin, perfumed paper. "My dear Emily," she began to read, her voice trembling. "If you are reading this, it means you have grown enough to find the treasure I prepared especially for you. I know I must be far away now, but I want you to know that my love for you will never end, not even after I'm gone." Richard squeezed his eyes shut, feeling the first tears in 2 years stream down his face. Emily continued reading. "I chose to leave this box in the garden because this was always our special place. Remember how we loved to plant things together, how happy you were when the flowers grew. I planted a special cherry tree in this spot because I want you to remember the sweet love I feel for you every time you eat a sweet fruit from this tree. Emily's voice began to choke up, but she continued, "Inside this box, you will find letters for each of your birthdays until you turn 18. They were written with so much love during the times I felt strongest and happiest thinking of you. I also left seeds of your favorite flowers for you to plant when you feel ready. And don't forget to take good care of Daddy. He's going to need you very much." Richard could no longer hold back his sobs. Sarah discreetly wiped her own tears as she watched father and daughter finally sharing the pain and love they had kept inside for so long. "There's more, Daddy," said Emily, noticing another paper at the bottom of the letter. "Keep reading, my daughter. P.S. Emily, there's a special letter here for Daddy too. Please give it to him when you open the box together. I know he will need some special words too." Emily searched the box and found a smaller envelope with the name Richard written on the front. With trembling hands, she handed it to her father. "Mommy left this for you too, Daddy." Richard took the envelope as if it might crumble in his hands. He took a deep breath before opening it and began to read silently. As his eyes moved across the lines, his face twisted in a mixture of pain and relief. "What did Mommy write to you, Daddy?" Richard cleared his throat and with a choked voice began to read, "My love, I know that when you read this, I will no longer be there to hug you when you come home tired from work. But I need to tell you some important things before I go. First, don't blame yourself for not spending more time with me in the last few months. I understood that working was your way of dealing with the situation, and I don't hold any resentment for that." Richard stopped reading, swallowing hard. "Continue, Daddy," Emily asked softly. "Second," continued Richard, "our daughter is going to need you very much. She will want to play in the garden, get her hands dirty with soil, do all the childish things we used to do together. Please don't stop her from being a child out of fear that it will make you remember me. Memories should not be a prison. They should be a gift." Sarah saw Richard squeeze his eyes shut before continuing. "Third, I chose to spend my last months preparing these gifts for you instead of fighting the inevitable, because I knew this would be my way of continuing to take care of you, even after I'm gone." Every letter I wrote for Emily was written thinking about how she would be at that age, what advice she would need, what words of love would make her feel safe. "Mommy really thought of everything, didn't she, Daddy?" "She always thought of everything, my daughter. She was always wiser than me." Richard returned to the letter. "Lastly, my love, I want you to know that these were the happiest years of my life. Having you and Emily, building our family, taking care of our garden together, none of that was lost. All of it continues to live in your hearts. Don't be afraid to be happy again. Don't be afraid to remember me with joy instead of sadness. Love doesn't end when a person leaves, it just changes form." The letter ended with a line that made Richard break down completely. "Take care of each other, my loves, and when Emily turns 18, plant a white rose bush next to the cherry tree. It will be my way of being present on the most important day of her life. With all my eternal love, Catherine." For long minutes, father and daughter cried in each other's arms in the garden, where Catherine had spent her last days preparing that loving farewell. Sarah watched, moved, understanding that she had witnessed something much greater than she had expected when she accepted that job. "Daddy," said Emily after they had calmed down, "can I plant the seeds Mommy left?" Richard looked at the box, where several small seed envelopes were carefully organized. Each one had a handwritten label: sunflowers for joy, daisies for hope, violets for sweet longing. "Of course, my daughter. Let's plant them together." "And you, Sarah?" asked Emily. "Will you help us?" Sarah looked at Richard, who for the first time since she had arrived smiled genuinely at her. "Mrs. Williams," he said, "I apologize for everything I said before. You are not fired. In fact, if you accept, I would like you to stay with us for a long time. Emily, we need someone like you." "It will be a pleasure, Mr. Thompson." In the days that followed, the Thompson household underwent a complete transformation. Richard began coming home earlier from the office to spend time with Emily in the garden. Together, they planted the seeds that Catherine had left, each one in a special spot. Sarah watched with satisfaction as father and daughter reconnected through the love that Catherine had planted along with those seeds. Richard began telling stories about Emily's mother, happy memories he had kept locked away for fear they would cause pain. "You know, Emily," he said one afternoon, as they watered the newly planted seedlings, "your mother always said that plants need not just water and sun, but also words of love to grow up beautiful. Is it true, Daddy? Do plants hear us?" "Your mother believed so, and I'm starting to believe it too." Sarah smiled, remembering her own childhood in the countryside, where her grandmother would always talk to the plants in the backyard. There was something comforting about seeing simple traditions being passed down from generation to generation, even through the pain of loss. A week later, Richard came home with a surprising announcement. "Emily, Sarah, I need to tell you something. I had a very important meeting at the office today." "What happened, Daddy?" "I've decided to make some changes at the company. I'm going to create a program for extended leave for fathers and mothers who have young children or who are going through difficult times with their families." Sarah raised her eyebrows, surprised. "And how did your partners react to that?" Richard sighed. "Some threatened to pull their investment. They said it was modern company nonsense and that it would hurt profits. But you know what I told them?" "What, Daddy?" "I told them that money can be earned again, but time lost with family never comes back. And if they can't understand that, then maybe they aren't the right partners for a company that truly cares about people." Emily ran to hug her father. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." That night, after Emily went to sleep, Richard and Sarah talked in the garden. The first seedlings were already beginning to sprout, small green dots emerging from the dark soil. "Mrs. William, Sarah," said Richard, "I want to thank you for everything you've done. If it weren't for your courage, Emily and I would still be trapped in our own grief." "Mr. Richard, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Why were you so afraid to face the loss of your wife?" Richard was silent for a few moments, looking at the stars in the sky. "Because I felt guilty," he said finally. "In the last months of Catherine's illness, I escaped to work. I thought that if I worked hard enough, I could pay for the best doctors, the best treatments, and somehow save her." "And you felt guilty for not having spent more time with her?" "Exactly. When she passed, I was sure I had failed as a husband and as a father. I thought that if I kept Emily away from everything that reminded us of Catherine, I could somehow protect her from the pain I was feeling. But you ended up protecting both of you from the love she had left behind." Richard nodded. "Catherine was always wiser than me. She knew that pain and love can coexist, that it's possible to feel longing and gratitude at the same time." Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now, continuing. The weeks passed, and the Thompson garden bloomed in a way it hadn't for years. The sunflowers grew tall and golden, the daisies formed small white and delicate flower beds, and the violets created a purple carpet around the cherry tree. Emily had found a new ritual. Every morning before going to school, she would stop by the garden to talk to the plants and with her mother. "Good morning, Mummy," she would say, gently touching the trunk of the cherry tree. "I have a math test today. Can you give me luck?" Sarah watched from the kitchen window, knowing those moments were fundamental to the girl's healing process. One day Emily came running into the house, shouting with joy, "Sarah, Daddy, look what I found!" She held in her hands small, sweet red cherries, the first fruits from the tree that Catherine had planted. "Mommy's tree bore fruit," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. Richard picked one of the fruits and tasted it. The sweet flavor exploded in his mouth, bringing back memories of Catherine laughing in the garden, explaining to Emily how fruits need time and patience to become perfect. "You know what this means, Emily?" he asked. "What, Daddy?" "It means your mother was right. The love she planted here really grew and is bearing fruit." That afternoon, they had a small celebration in the garden. Sarah prepared a simple cake, and they ate the first cherries together, toasting with fruit juice to Catherine's memory. "Daddy," said Emily, "can I open the letter for my next birthday?" Richard checked his mental calendar. Emily's 9th birthday was only 2 weeks away. "I think we can make an exception," he said, smiling. They went to get the box, which was now kept in Emily's room, and looked for the envelope marked 9 years. The letter contained advice about friendship, about how to be kind to schoolmates, and ended with a special chocolate cake recipe that Catherine used to make for birthdays. "Sarah," Emily asked, "can you help me make this cake for my party?" "Of course, sweetheart, it will be a pleasure." Emily's 9th birthday party was completely different from the previous ones. Instead of a formal event with hired entertainers, it was a simple celebration in the garden, with the flowers that Catherine had chosen as natural decoration. Richard invited some colleagues from work and their children, and was surprised to realize how good it was to see his daughter playing naturally with other children, without worrying about keeping up appearances. "Mr. Thompson," said one of the younger partners, "your daughter seems very happy, and the garden is beautiful." "My wife always said that happiness grows like a plant," replied Richard. "It needs care, patience, and lots of love." During the party, Emily made a point of showing all her little friends the special cherry tree and telling them about the treasure her mother had left. Sarah watched with satisfaction as the girl had transformed her pain into a story of love and hope. In the late afternoon, when the guests had left, Richard, Emily, and Sarah sat in the garden to watch the sunset. "Daddy," said Emily, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my daughter. Do you still get sad when you remember Mommy?" Richard thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes, yes, Emily, but now it's a different sadness. It's a sadness mixed with gratitude for having had her in our life, and with joy for the beautiful things she left for us. Like the garden and the letters. Like the garden, the letters, and especially like you. You are the greatest gift your mother gave me." Emily snuggled into her father's lap, and the two of them watched the colors of the sky change from gold to pink, then to purple. "Sarah," Richard said suddenly, "I have a proposal to make." "Go ahead, Mr. Richard. What if you weren't just Emily's governess anymore, but officially part of our family? Emily needs a strong female figure in her life, and I've learned a lot from you too." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. She had come to that house just looking for a job to support her mother, but she had found so much more than that. "It would be an honor, Mr. Richard." "Then it's settled. And please, stop calling me Mr. Richard. We're family now." In the months that followed, the household routine settled in naturally. Richard managed to better balance work and family life, getting home in time to help Emily with her homework and spend time in the garden. Sarah brought her mother, Mrs. Miller, to live with them. The 70-year-old woman, despite her health problems, loved taking care of the plants and telling Emily old stories. "Grandma Miller," Emily would say, "did Mommy like plants like you do?" "Oh, my child," Mrs. Miller would reply, "your mother had a special gift with plants. She talked to them as if they were friends. So that's why the garden became so beautiful." "That's right, dear. Love never dies, it just changes places." One Saturday afternoon, as Richard was watering the plants, he received an unexpected visit. It was Dr. Davis, one of the oldest partners in the company, accompanied by two men Richard didn't know. "Richard, we need to talk," said Dr. Davis with a serious expression. "Of course, doctor, let's go to the office." "Actually, I'd prefer to talk out here. What I want to talk about has to do with all this," he said, gesturing to the garden. Richard grew tense. He knew that his changes at the company hadn't pleased all the partners. "These are Mr. Harrison and Mr. Parker from the Corporate Foundation for Social Responsibility," said Dr. Davis. "They came here on my recommendation." Richard looked confused at the three men. "Richard," Mr. Harrison continued, "Dr. Davis told us about the changes you implemented at the company. The family leave program, the scholarships for employees' children, the flexible hours policy for parents." "Yes, and so?" "These initiatives caught our attention," said Mr. Parker. "We want to nominate your company for the National Responsible Business Award." Richard could hardly believe what he was hearing. "But Dr. Davis was always against these changes." Dr. Davis smiled. "I was wrong, Richard. In the last few months I've seen more motivated employees, less staff turnover, and paradoxically, higher productivity. It seems that when people feel cared for, they work better." "Furthermore," added Mr. Harrison, "your personal story about how you rediscovered the importance of family could inspire other business owners to rethink their priorities." Richard looked out at the garden, where Emily was playing with Mrs. Miller among the flowers that Catherine had planted from seeds. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing lunch, and the aroma reached the backyard. "Gentlemen," Richard said, "I accept the nomination, but on one condition." "What is it?" "If we win the award, I want to use the money to create a national support program for families who have lost a parent. I want other children like Emily to get help dealing with loss without also losing the connection to the love that remained." The three men looked at each other, impressed. "That is exactly the kind of vision we look for," said Mr. Parker. That night during dinner, Richard told the family about the visit from the Foundation men. "Daddy," said Emily, "if you win the award, does it mean you're going to help other kids like me?" "That's right, my daughter. Mommy would be so proud of you, Daddy." Richard smiled, feeling for the first time since Catherine's departure that he was on the right path. A few months later, the news arrived. Richard's company had indeed won the award. The ceremony would be in Washington, D.C., and he could bring his family. "Sarah, Emily, you're coming with me," he announced. "After all, you were fundamental to this change." "And Grandma Miller?" asked Emily. "Grandma Miller is coming too, of course. We're all going together." The trip to Washington, D.C. was the first family trip they had taken since Catherine's departure. Richard was moved to see Emily excited on the plane, telling Sarah and Mrs. Miller about the clouds below. During the ceremony, when Richard went on stage to receive the award, his speech was simple but moving. "This award is not mine. It belongs to a woman who, even knowing she would soon depart, used her last months to plant seeds of love that would continue to grow after her. It belongs to a brave little girl who taught me that playing in the dirt doesn't dirty your hands, but cleans your soul. And it belongs to a housekeeper who had the courage to unearth a treasure I was afraid to find." The audience was moved when Richard continued, "My wife Catherine always said that love is like a seed. When planted with care, it grows and bears fruit that can feed many people. Today, with this award, we are going to plant seeds of hope in families going through difficult times, because no one should have to choose between working to support their family and being present to care for it." When Richard came down from the stage, Emily ran to hug him. "Daddy, you talked about Mommy to everyone." "I did, my daughter, and I'm sure she was here with us." Back in New York City, life continued with a now established and harmonious routine. The national program Richard created with the prize money started operating, helping hundreds of families across the country. Emily grew up happy and healthy, keeping her tradition of talking to the plants every morning. Sarah had become much more than a housekeeper. She was the older sister Emily never had, and the partner Richard needed to rebuild his life. Mrs. Miller, despite her health problems, found a new purpose tending the garden and telling Emily stories about medicinal plants she knew from the countryside. One spring morning, almost a year after they found the buried box, Emily woke up running to the garden as she always did, but this time she shouted louder than usual. "Daddy! Sarah! Grandma Miller, come here quick!" Everyone came running, thinking something had happened, but when they reached the garden, they saw Emily pointing at the cherry tree with eyes shining with emotion. Overnight, the tree had become covered with small white flowers. It was the first full bloom since Catherine had planted it. "Look how beautiful it is," said Emily. "Mommy's tree is all in bloom." Richard approached and noticed something that made him swallow hard with emotion. The flowers had opened in such a way that, seen from above, they formed an almost perfect heart around the tree's canopy. "My goodness," whispered Mrs. Miller. "I've never seen a tree bloom like that." Sarah smiled, remembering Catherine's words in the letter. "Love doesn't end when a person leaves, it just changes form." "Emily," said Richard, his voice choked, "I think your mother is sending us a message." "What kind of message, Daddy?" "That she is happy with our family, that she approves of the changes we've made, and that her love for us is blooming along with this tree." That afternoon, they had a picnic in the garden, under the flowering cherry tree. Emily read some passages from the letters she had already opened, and Richard told more stories about Catherine. "Daddy," Emily said suddenly, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, my daughter. Sometimes I dream about Mommy, and she's always smiling. I think she's happy where she is." "I think so too, Emily. And you know what else? What? In the dream, she always tells me to take good care of you, and that she sent Sarah to help us. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. Your mother was very wise, Emily. When night fell, Richard found himself alone in the garden, as had become his habit every night. He would speak softly to Catherine, telling her about his day, about Emily, about their plans for the future. Catherine, my love, he said that night, I want to thank you, not just for the letters or the seeds or the buried box, but for teaching me, even after you were gone, that love is stronger than fear. A gentle breeze swayed the flowers of the cherry tree, and Richard smiled. Emily is growing up beautiful and strong. She has your kind heart and your wisdom. And I learned to be the father she deserves, and the man you always saw in me. Richard gently touched the trunk of the tree. Sarah has become part of our family, as I know you wanted. And Mrs. Miller brought even more love into this house. We've created a new family, without forgetting the one we had before. That night, Richard slept with more peace than he had felt in years, and for the first time since Catherine had passed, he dreamed of her not as a goodbye, but as a blessing. The years passed, and Emily grew up in a house full of love, care, and good memories. Every time she felt sad or lost, she would open a new letter from her mother and find exactly the words she needed to hear. When she turned 15, Catherine's letter talked about first loves and how to choose true friends. At 16, about dreams and how to pursue them with determination. At 17, about the importance of being kind to herself and others. Richard had become not only a better father, but also a businessman respected nationally for his humane policies. His program supporting grieving families had helped thousands of people across the country. Sarah completed her teaching studies and became an expert in educating grieving children. She began giving lectures and training other professionals, always using her experience with the Thompson family as an example of positive transformation. Mrs. Miller, at 80 years old, still tended to the garden with care and had become a sort of grandmother to several children in the neighborhood who came to hear her stories. When Emily turned 18, the whole family gathered in the garden for a special moment. It was time to open the last letter and plant the white rose bush that Catherine had requested. With hands trembling with emotion, Emily opened the last envelope. The letter was longer than all the others. My dear Emily, if you are reading this, it means you have become a young woman. I hope you have grown up strong, kind, and courageous, as I always knew you would be. Richard, Sarah, and Mrs. Miller listened in respectful silence as Emily read, Now that you are an adult, I want to tell you the truth about why I chose to prepare these letters instead of fighting my illness. It wasn't because I gave up on living. It was because I chose to use the time I had left to make sure my love for you would last forever. Emily stopped reading, tears in her eyes. Continue, sweetheart, Sarah encouraged. Every letter I wrote was written imagining you at that specific age. I tried to think of what I would say if I were there with you, and know that, in a way, I always was. Every time you were kind to someone, every time you cared for a plant, every time you hugged your father when he was sad, I was there through the love I left in your heart. Richard discreetly wiped his eyes. Now I want you to plant this white rose bush next to the cherry tree. White roses represent new beginnings, and that is what your adult life represents. You have your whole future ahead of you, and I know it will be amazing. There's more, said Emily, turning the page. There is one last surprise in the box. Check the false bottom. Everyone looked at each other confused. Richard picked up the box and examined it carefully. There really was a false bottom they had never noticed. Inside, they found a small, hand-bound book. What is this, Dad? Richard opened the book, and on the first page was written, Recipes and Secrets from the Thompson Family Garden, from Catherine to Emily. The book contained all of Catherine's favorite recipes, gardening tips, and home remedies she had learned from her own mother, and on the last page, a detailed drawing of how she imagined the garden would look when all the plants were fully grown. Mom, whispered Emily, you really thought of everything. That afternoon, they planted the white rosebush exactly where Catherine had indicated. When they finished, Richard made an announcement. "Emily, now that you're an adult, I want to give you something special." "What is it, Dad?" "Starting today, you are officially a partner in the company, and more than that, I want you to lead the expansion of the family support program. You lived that experience, you grew up with it. No one can do that job better than you." Emily hugged her father tightly. "Dad, I accept, but on one condition." "What?" "I want Sarah to be my partner. Together we can help so many more families." Sarah smiled, moved. "It would be an honor, Emily." Mrs. Miller, who had been watching everything in silence, approached the newly planted rosebush. "This plant is going to grow up beautiful," she said. "I can feel it." That night, the whole family had dinner in the garden, illuminated by small lanterns hanging from the trees. The garden had been transformed into a small paradise, with flowers of every color and fruit trees that Catherine never got to see fully grown. "You know," said Richard, looking around, "I used to think this garden was just a painful reminder of what we had lost." "And what do you think now?" asked Sarah. "Now I know it's a living reminder of what we gained. Catherine didn't just leave us memories, she left us a legacy of love that keeps growing every day." Emily stood up and went to the cherry tree, now a strong and beautiful tree laden with sweet fruit. "Thank you, Mum," she said softly, "for planting so much love that is still growing." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tree, as if Catherine was sending a hug from wherever she was. 2 years later, Emily graduated with a degree in psychology and began working officially on the program she and Sarah had expanded. They created a unique methodology for caring for grieving families, always emphasizing that love does not die, it just changes form. Richard found a perfect balance between work and family. He had learned that being a successful businessman didn't mean sacrificing personal relationships. Sarah married David, a kind teacher she met at one of the lectures she gave about education. They built a small house on the property next to the Thompson family, and Emily gained 2 little brothers of the heart. Mrs. Miller turned 85 and still cared for the garden with help from Emily and Sarah. She had become a kind of wise matriarch to the extended family. On a spring afternoon, 5 years after finding the buried box, Richard was working in his office when he heard laughter coming from the garden. Through the window, he saw Emily teaching Sarah's young children how to plant seeds in the same spot where she used to play as a child. "Look," she was saying, "you need to make a little hole. Place the seed gently inside, cover it with soil, and talk to it so it grows up beautiful." "Do plants really hear us, Aunt Emily?" asked 4-year-old Michael. "Of course they do. My mummy taught me that. And she learned it from her grandmother. It's a tradition in our family." Richard smiled, realizing how the cycle of love kept repeating itself from generation to generation. That night, as he had done every night for 5 years, Richard went to the garden for his conversation with Catherine. "Catherine, my love," he said, "today I realized something wonderful. The love you planted here didn't stay just with us. It's spreading to other families, to other children who are learning that it's possible to be happy, even after a great loss." Richard touched the white rose bush, which was now covered in buds about to bloom. "Emily has become an amazing woman, just as you always knew she would be. And I've become the man you always saw in me, even when I couldn't see it myself." One of the white roses chose that moment to open fully, filling the air with its sweet fragrance. "I know you are happy where you are," Richard continued, "and I want you to know that we are happy here too, happy in a way we didn't imagine was possible after you left." Richard sat on the small bench they had placed under the cherry tree and watched the stars. "Thank you, Catherine, for having the courage to love us even though you knew you would have to leave, for planting seeds of hope when you could have given in to despair, for teaching us that love is stronger than pain." A shooting star crossed the sky at that moment, and Richard smiled. "See you later, my love, until tomorrow." And so the story of a family that was almost lost to pain became the story of how love, planted with care, can flourish even in the most difficult circumstances. The garden that was once a symbol of loss was transformed into a sanctuary of hope. where many generations would continue to learn that sometimes life's greatest treasures are buried right under our feet, waiting for us to have the courage to dig deep enough to find them. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story of overcoming and family love? Do you believe Richard made the right decisions in the end? Leave your comment with your opinion, and don't forget to like the video to support our channel. Your participation is essential for us to bring more inspiring stories like this to other people who need hope.